Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Orita Podcast. I am Aaron Schwartz, one of the founders of Orita. We build AI segmentation for a bunch of brands across email, SMS, direct mail. And today we're talking to Will Pearson from Scalero. Will and I met a decade ago. He still has the emails. I have multiple companies since that, where there was a world where Mr. Pearson was going to take over my watch company, my consumer brand. But maybe we'll dovetail into that a little bit. But let me get out of the way. Will, would love for you to introduce yourself and your background. And obviously we'll go into what you're doing now, but kind of how'd you get here, please?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it was inevitable our paths would cross again after that 10 years ago. But yeah, as you said, I'm Will Pearson. I'm one of the founders of Scalero. We are a lifecycle marketing studio. So our primary offering is a more of a service-based offering that helps brands with email marketing, SMS, data engineering, everything related to lifecycle marketing. We've also built a couple of pieces of software over the years. They have Italian dessert names, tiramisu and cannoli. And we really just want to be experts in this space and, really focused on it and help brands of all sizes with the challenges they have around lifecycle.
All right, I'm going to start here and then I'll go back to your background. The most important thing is on Wednesday last week, our team did our icebreaker of the most overrated dessert. And tiramisu was like, I think, first place by a mile. So what's the deal? Do we like it? Is this like a joke? I don't know. I just want to.
Yeah. No. So if you wanted me to get really nerdy into it, tiramisu is a layered dessert, right? Has multiple layers to it. Our software has layers to it, right? It's all about the design of the email, the code, the template. So, there's relation there. I don't think enough people have used tiramisu to our software to call it overrated. So, maybe after this, we'll have people try it and be like, it doesn't do any of the things you say and that it is definitely overrated.
This is more like key lime pie. It's properly rated. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. I want to go back to how you started the organization. I'm going to come back to studio, data engineering, and everything you're doing today. But can you go a little deeper into your background, how you got here, how you founded Scalero?
Yeah. So I started my career in retail. I worked for Target Corporation. I did a few different roles there. Needed to get into the tech space and startup space and a little bit more into the e-commerce world too. And I joined Vivino, which is a wine app in their early days. And, my role was to help get their e-commerce operations off the ground. And, that literally meant going to Napa many days of the week and looking at warehouses there and understanding, the logistics of shipping wine and all the complications around that, the legal aspects. So it was a crash course for sure in that industry and also just, working at a startup, working at a tech company. And as Vivino scaled and grew, I started to eventually take over the P&L and I was responsible for revenue, and email marketing was far and away the number one channel to generate revenue at Vivino. So my now co-founder Scalero was one of the first marketing hires at Vivino as well. And he ended up taking over the CRM lifecycle team while I was running the operations on the e-commerce side. So he and I just had really in-depth chats, almost every day about how to maximize revenue and how to leverage email marketing, push notifications, text messaging, automations, daily campaigns, which became multi-daily campaigns, et cetera. So just, I think like many people who end up in lifecycle marketing, it was a bit accidental. And all of a sudden we found ourselves with a lot of knowledge in the space and an interest in being entrepreneurs. So we decided to take the leap. We had a lot of ideas on what this could look like, but again, lifecycle marketing was kind of the lowest barrier of entry for us to get going just with our skill sets. So that led us to do that. And we wanted to build software and fill in some pain points we had while operating at Vivino, where we had 30 plus people that were touching email marketing every single day. And that brought a lot of stress and pain. And so we launched Scalero and started to build tiramisu, and we bootstrapped by offering up services, and then we raised a little bit of money to scale the software, and then we pulled back on the software. And, we've had this big, long journey I'm sure we can get into, but that was really the genesis of it.
You started thinking lifecycle marketing. Right now, you just talked about data engineering. You called it a studio, not an agency. What is different today from how you kind of envisioned the business at the beginning?
Yeah. So it was really, it was 2019 when we started. I don't know if I said that part. And we really envisioned this kind of large scope software for email marketers that had project management in it. It had design in it. It had coding. It had templating. And it had collaboration amongst teammates. Our timing was a little off there because it was right around the time that project management tools in general became super popular. The Notions, Asanas of the world. Figma became really popular as well. And so a lot of the features that we thought were needed for email marketers were being solved by other tools. And, we weren't going to compete with Figma. So it reduced the scope quite a bit on what the tool was, which ultimately became, a templating collaboration tool. And as we started working with more brands, some of them were into the software and some of them were just like, can you just help me send more emails? And maybe that meant we could use our software internally ourselves and they wouldn't have to touch it. And that was kind of the first evolution to being more of a kind of services agency type of company. And we found that, there's a big need for that. Email is, even though it's a marketing channel, it's been around for quite a while, it is quite complex and, really requires expertise and a lot of handholding.
Are there other tools that you guys are building internally? And is there any world where you're going to start building stuff externally? Or is it always like, hey, how do we go be more efficient, drive more impact for our customers? Like what do you philosophically, how do you approach that problem?
Yeah, we're doing a little bit of both. So we launched Cannoli a few years ago, which again came out of a pain point that we had, which was taking a Figma design and putting it into HTML code. So we've tried to automate that process as much as possible. We built a bunch of stuff internally. We actually did just release an external tool. It's a Figma plugin that's called Autoslice, and it integrates with Klaviyo and MailChimp and essentially takes the Figma design and slices it automatically for you. So you get the proper rendering within Klaviyo. So, nothing kind of super innovative, changing the world, but just, little things where it's like, a human has to spend 15 minutes on this 10 times a day. So what if that becomes 1 minute instead? That's how we think a lot about our workflow. And this one seemed like an obvious one to put out in the market too.
It's interesting as I have a lot of these conversations, as you can imagine, like not just with agencies, but with brands and also people who are not even in this space, right? But thinking about Gen AI, and I'd say 99% of the conversations I have are about how do I go create like Scalero's customers, creative, faster, better, stronger. But the examples you've given are all about like, hey, there's still that like creative process, whatever it is, tied to the brand. And then we're going to help with the project management side, the like operationalizing side, if you think about Autoslice. Is that just by happenstance because where you were and you're also experimenting on the Gen AI and like accelerating creative, or, I'd love to dive further into how you're thinking about that problem set.
Yeah, I think there's a few things related to that. We haven't really built this business in a way that we can guarantee we're just going to make your revenue explode, right? Like I think email marketing just requires so many steps to execute. We think of it as every email is like building a landing page or a web page. And that's still, even though it's gotten easier over time, it's still pretty hard to do that and be proud of the work there. And so we want to bring vision to life. And, a lot of our clients are not just e-commerce retailers, but a lot of tech companies too. And so many of them are focused on product-led growth. And, it's all about the product and the product kind of sells itself, but you have to get people in the product. And that's what email's for. So email's not for necessarily generating a ton of revenue, but just to increase engagement. And I think that lesson applies really well to brands too. And we try to convey that to our clients. Like, of course, if the fundamentals are right and you're doing things right and sending relevant messages, revenue will follow. But, it is about the product and it is about the branding. That's a really key element to that. So I think that all ties into our premise of like, just do the work in a really high quality way and good results will follow it. But, there's no big magic bullet when it comes to email marketing. It really is a slog. It's a step-by-step to get to a good point.
The way you talk about engagement really resonates. One of the, we've been around for give or take 3 years, but like 2.5 years really in market. And one of the things we just launched probably a couple months ago is like an at-bats analysis and engagement analysis. Be like, look, we're going to go find you a sale today because we emailed Will and you wouldn't have emailed Will. And like Orita segments are really good. But really a purchase from an email is an extremely rare event. And what you really want to know is like all things being equal, are you more efficient at driving clicks, driving website visits, and like actually getting people to engage because they need to explore, not true for every, but for 95% of brands, they need to explore what is your brand? Like why you differentiated? What is your story? What is the community? What is their journey going to be? And I think that is very much undervalued, is like sometimes you actually want people, like, you slow down to speed up, you get customers to really engage with the company, with your story. And then when they become a customer, then they have a better chance of being a repeat customer or customer for life, because they will have more affinity to you. You talk about things very differently from most of our agency partners in that regard. Like, it's very apparent to me. I have an assumption that part of this is tied to the fact that you do work with tech companies, you work outside of brands. And so you're thinking about the customer journey differently. Walk through, like, what do you see? Or, this isn't about you comparing to any other agency or anybody else in the space, but like, how do you really like unpeel when you're talking to a brand? Like, how do you help them see that actually that journey does matter?
Yeah. I think the concept of at bats, really, really resonates too. And you need to have you need to be out there. You need to be out there. You need to be sending messages. Like, I definitely lean on the side of send more than send less, provided that, the more isn't just garbage, of course, but the assumption is that it's going to be pretty good. And I think that's the case, with, for example, a lot of our tech clients. It's like, we know that if we can get somebody into the product 3 times before day 7, then they're going to pay for a subscription, or they're going to be around for 6 months, or, whatever those metrics are. And I think brands could kind of use that lesson too of, those first, and I don't even know if it's 7 days, it might just be 3 days after someone has heard of your brand or seen an ad and clicked on it. You've got to get them back in, or else, that's probably it. And so it's okay to over communicate and try to tell that story, as much as possible, as you alluded to, so that you quickly build up affinity, so that when they are ready to purchase, you're there and you're ready for them. I've had some of the smarter operators I've met with over the years. They often talk about email just kind of being a reminder, and less so of like, this has to drive this much revenue, but it's just like, hey, we're here. When you're ready, you'll know where to find us. We'll find you again. And, I just think that's a much healthier approach than, relying on email to generate X% of revenue for you.
When you think about your role in that regard, let's focus on the reminder side of things. Is it partially like you want to share a bunch of useful information in the email? Is it like, hey, you want to do just enough to get somebody in the site to like go engage with the product or the story, or again, whatever that quote unquote correct journey is? Or is it all the above?
I think it's all the above. You want to put some of that information in the email, but you really want to get them back on site. Most likely, if you're pushing 15% off in the email, the second that user lands on your site, it's probably a pop-up telling them to get 15% off, their first purchase. So yeah, it's just all about getting them back on the site and what's going to trigger that.
Can you talk a little bit about why, like the data engineering side? Is it because you're actually like really controlling the full journey, or when you say that, right? And again, we talk to a ton of agencies. I can think of a handful that have any engineers, let alone like the next level of like a data engineer. So where does that team fit, or like what is the job to be done that you have this in-house?
Yeah. I mean, our first few years running this business, we just hit roadblocks sometimes where we had a great vision, either that we created or our point of contact on the marketing team created, to build out this great lifecycle program or customer journeys. And then, the data is not there, or the user attributes are not there, or, it's just not feasible with their custom built e-commerce platform, things like that. And so, we had engineers building software on our side, and once in a while they would come over to the dark side and do some client work, and we could see some results there. And it really unlocked it for us that, there's so much that can be done on the data side that impacts lifecycle marketing. And that's really where it starts. Like, we don't necessarily take on projects that are far away from lifecycle, that are super upstream. But, if there is a downstream effect that unlocks lifecycle, that's our goal. And that's our bread and butter, is to, kind of be a long run partner for our clients. And if that starts by unlocking some data access to them so that you can do some really cool journeys, that's important to us.
Has there been any pull to move more into performance marketing, or to move more into like full service, even if it means you are white labeling somebody else, or you're just have a partnership, whether you're like in the same company or not, but it's like, oh yeah, we always work with XYZ agency. They'll handle your Shopify migration to like, how do you create the boundaries of where Scalero plays?
Yeah, it's always been tempting. I think I'm sure most agencies can relate. You pretty much always say yes when you get a request and then figure it out. So we've done a lot of that. And, I would say the first 3 or 4 years of Scalero, there were a lot of priorities, a lot of focuses, and that's okay, right? We're growing and figuring it out. And then the last 3 years has been super, super focused. And now I think we want to be the best, in this niche that we've chosen to be in. And if we feel like the operations and the systems are really strong in there, maybe you can take on something else afterwards. Understanding, where our limits are in terms of Brant and me as co-founders and our leadership team. So we've been asked, many times to do other things. And the last few years we've said no, and we've found partners and things like that. I would say today we're feeling a little bit more ready maybe to take on some additional work like that, but it's all about making sure that, the equal amount of systems and processes are in place to do that as they are on the lifecycle side, and that we have bandwidth to actually execute that. So it's being, it's always being considered, but, to this point, I think a lot of our success is just attributed to like extreme focus.
And yet you serve tech companies and brands. Does that ever create conflict for you in that, like, you guys are obviously focused, but it's two very different customer bases? Where is like the conflict, or how does that actually help you get better at serving each of them?
I honestly can't think of any conflicts at all, and so, and in some cases, it's a strength, right? If there's a e-commerce brand that sees themselves a little bit differently than a typical e-commerce brand, then we can talk about our tech experience and what works over there, and vice versa, right? If there's a tech company that's selling $20 subscriptions, maybe there is a little bit of an e-commerce lens you need to put on that. So I think it works, and there's often platform overlap. Tech companies use Klaviyo, e-commerce brands use Klaviyo, tech companies use Customer.io, and marketplaces use Customer. Like there's a lot of that too. So having that platform expertise also really helps.
Yeah, one of the things that was really interesting to me in our conversation before is, first of all, the whole conversation is interesting. So let me just say, look, it's wonderful. But was the fact that you guys are, I don't want to, my words, not yours, but platform agnostic, but you meet the customers where they're at. And if they're on Braze or they're on Customer or they're on Klaviyo, you're there. How do you think, like if you were starting a brand today, you're taking over a brand, $25 million, $50 million brands, like solid brand, growing, has like, looking to go the distance. How do you think about what platforms to use? Or is it really like all these platforms will serve you in different ways depending on your team?
Yes.
I'm not trying, this isn't meant to be a trick question, like stack rank the platform, more just like, what is the decisioning? And then even expanding into like what subscription tools to use, or like, how do you, I don't know, what is the alchemy of choosing software, given that there are so many great players?
Yeah, I think I'll kind of turn this a bit and say my advice to marketers, and something I don't see a lot of, is really thinking of the data aspect of it. So, a marketer may get excited by, some new features on a platform, or maybe there's, performance is dipped in email and the solution is, let's go find another tool. And this one you can do this way, without really thinking through how to actually get data into that platform and how to leverage that data, and maybe the work around that. And maybe your company is not necessarily structured to do that, or it's been built in a way that the data comes in well into whatever platform you're on. So, I would really evaluate that. And, if you're just, a standard shop using Shopify, like you probably have a lot of different options, but most likely there's going to be some kind of complexity in there, especially as you hit 50 million plus. There's something you're dealing with, whether it's subscription or international or something that's going to make things a little more complex. So try to work through that, understand internally how things operate, and that'll help kind of form what your decision is.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. I introduced you to a buddy's brand. They're doing great. And you have a 30-minute discovery call with them, and you're thinking about Lifecycle. What are the like main things that you are inspecting first? Is it like, are there core metrics that really sing to you and you're like, oh, I really want to understand how you're performing? Are there metrics that people think matter that you don't? Like, I want to get a little more tactical on this.
Yeah, I probably obsess over the workflow more than anything else. Like, how does an email get out the door currently? And I say email, but obviously, push or text, applies as well. Yeah, how do they get out the door? How many people are involved? What's the system behind that? Are you project managing? How does creative get out the door? Is it one person doing it? Is your design team? All that. We really want to understand that, because that's where we can help unlock. If you're sending 30 campaigns a month, maybe there are workflow improvements that get you to 50, and that is going to help improve those KPIs. That, yes, I will ask about KPIs too and understand those. But again, I don't feel great about saying, okay, you're making 10 cents on every send. If you work with us, it'll be 15. Like I need to understand why it's 10 cents and the inputs into that, before we can really try to improve the outputs.
Heard. I think it's very, I don't know. It's clear that you want to get deeply into the weeds to understand the brand and like what their objectives are and then how they do stuff. Are there metrics that you find brands referencing or thinking about where you're like, guys, this is not kind of like actually that valuable right now? Like any clear things where, and obviously it depends and sometimes, all the caveats included, but are there places where you find brand operators sniffing around where you're like, this actually isn't as important as these other metrics that you should be paying attention to?
Yeah. I mean, I find the question interesting because again, we're so life cycle focused and it just seems like there's only a handful of metrics that people look at when it comes to life cycle. And so you've got the opens and the clicks and the conversions and the revenue and things. And honestly, there's not a ton more to it, right? Like we mostly we always look at unique openers or unique clickers on a given month or a given period of time and just make sure you're hitting, different people in the audience. Like, Orita is a great tool for that too. But, email is so commonly known just to be the best, ROI channel that it's never really questioned like, should I invest in this? It's like, how do I just continue to get more and more out of it?
Will you help them understand like on a cohort analysis, right? Because you're talking about life cycle. And so all those metrics are true. And what you're trying to do is say like, great, we're going to in spirit, hey, I want to tighten the time between my first and second purchase or the time from somebody signing up until their first purchase. Like in terms of that, is that like pretty common or is even that stuff that you're bringing into all your brands at this point?
Yeah, I think it seems pretty common. We'll ask the questions and usually we can get an answer on it or, help them find it. I wouldn't say it's something that we are necessarily going to say, okay, here's exactly the data we're going to bring to you. Like, again, it's kind of meeting them where they are, as you said. But yeah, generally they're pretty in control of that. And I found the marketing automation tools have gotten really good at just, providing a lot of that data as well. So it's less about going to find it and more about just clicking on the right spot and then acting upon it.
I want to think about the change in lifecycle marketing from like even 2019 when you started through today and where you see stuff going. One of the comments you just made is the platforms are getting better. They're stronger. Even if it's 80-20, like the first recommendation is much better today than it was 6 months ago, much better than maybe there was no recommendation 5 years ago. It's like Wild West. What other changes have you seen, whether it's like within tools or channels, like new channels that have popped up that like should be a core part of a marketing, like of a life cycle mix? And then I'll ask about going forward. But yeah, what are the biggest changes that you've seen in the last couple of years?
Yeah, right on cue there. I think the channels, it seems like 5 years ago, it was email in one tool, maybe SMS in another, but there were only a few. Push notifications was like, like for an e-commerce brand, it was like, what is this? What type of tool do we have to use for that? And that seems to have all really kind of been consolidated in a way where it's pretty easy now to build journeys across different channels. And that was almost an unheard of concept a few years ago. And then I think again, going back to workflow, like the builders themselves have gotten easier and higher quality in terms of just, turning a nice design into an email. That was one of our hypotheses with tiramisu and cannoli was like, it's just hard to build a good looking email out of the box in these tools, but that's gotten a lot easier. And, the ability to use modules and components and things like that to scale it out. Again, these seem to be more like the last 3 to 4 years type of additions that have just helped with scaling quite a bit. And obviously, AI is sort of the elephant in the room of how each tool is implementing AI and what that means.
Have brands changed their expectations of you because of AI promises or what the platforms are saying they can do, even if they can't really do it? Like, how has that changed your life recently?
Yeah. Yeah. This is more of a gut feeling than actually having data behind this, but we do feel like our speed has had to increase quite a bit, over the last year or so. Our output has had to increase and just out of pure expectations, right? We kind of share, here's what you can expect when you work with us. And I don't even know if people pay attention to that anymore because you do kind of expect the ability to instantly produce right now. So we're working through that.
What are some of the changes that you're excited about kind of coming? Is it purely like down the workflow side? Is it any on the creative side? Are there
Mhm.
new channels that you're exploring? I don't know. Like, what's the next year hold? I'm not going to ask you to project out 5 years from now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I know. I'm very skeptical whenever I see a headline that has the like a time frame in it. I'm like I
Well, what does the
understand that.
next 36 hours of AI hold?
Yeah,
Good luck.
exactly. I know. Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. I think it's really every aspect. I think has gotten a little bit easier in some ways, but also it's unlocked a lot more to do.
Mm,
I keep using the expression, I've never been more productive, but I've also never had more to do. Like I think that's really common for people that are using AI a lot. And so on the strategy side, you've got this built-in thought partner at all times, right? That's helping you build out what the program
mhm.
should be. You can feed it data and get the analysis, like the cohort analysis you're talking about. Like that's a 5-minute project these days, basically. Design, there's a lot of improvements there. I think we have found that AI is pretty good at organizing design, maybe less so than creating new stuff from scratch. But if you've
Mm,
got a lot of design, like it can create the modules for you or the components that I was referencing. Coding, obviously, we can get 90% of the way to a pretty complex email code using AI. Project management, I don't know. They're all kind of relevant. And then we think of our jobs as operators of the marketing automation tools. And so as they evolve and they start to automate a lot of the processes within the tools, we have to understand that and keep up with that and, still become great operators of the tools, even if the tools are very much, AI driven, which I'm sure is where that's like the 1 to 5 year
yeah.
question. Like that's where they're going. And we have to keep up with that too.
I imagine it's a full-time job keeping up with what is Klaviyo changing and what is Braze changing because their velocity is improving as well.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And
Interesting.
even, a feature release, just to use Klaviyo as an example, can make a lot of headlines and then you use it the day it's released and it doesn't really work.
Sure.
But then you get back to it 3 weeks later and it's working fantastically. So it's
Yeah.
like the evolution, even within each feature, happens very quickly too. And
Yeah.
that's the element of like, we have to keep up with this. You can
Yeah.
read the headline and you can use it, but then what's it look like a month from now?
I hear you. I
Mhm.
think the last theme I'd love to dig in with you is around consumer expectations, consumer behavior, right? We're talking about this from the brand side of, okay, cool. How do we tell our story through the channels in like in a data driven way where we're talking to Will when Will wants to hear from us, or talking to Aaron when Aaron wants to hear from us, whatever. How, if at all, have like you seen consumer expectations change for your customers and is something accelerating? You don't have to, this can very much be gut feel, not data
Mhm.
driven again, right? But I'm curious what you're experiencing, seeing across so many different like high performing brands and tech companies.
Yeah, the summary of your inbox, I think, is something we're keeping our pulse on. And so, if Apple or Gmail or whomever is not going to show you email by default, if it's just going to pull out headlines for you, then essentially you have to make an email that's worth a headline for your consumers. And so I think that's what we're starting to see and we'll probably see more of. And that might mean, an obvious one is like, that's 15% off. Like that'll break through. But if you're just, sending an email that has some products on it, there's not really a good story to it. It's probably going to get buried with everything else, as it might now if someone's manually doing it, but they may not even see it at all, right? It just never appears in their inbox. I think that's a real possibility pretty soon for most people's inboxes to look like that. So just having that headline is going to be what matters more so than the rest of the email.
If it's not 15% off and it's not new product launching, what are some bets that you're placing or what are some concepts you have where it's like, hey, I actually think we can break through and get into the inbox in
Mhm.
this new world?
Yeah. If selling wine through email taught me nothing else, it's that storytelling is everything. We could sell the best wine in the world, highest rated wine of Vivino, but if it didn't have that hook around the
Mm,
winemaker or, the exact region it was from. We had a joke of if you started writing about the soil, you've gone too far. It's maybe not a good wine to sell. Like people don't care about the soil, but there are other stories they care about. And so telling the story of your brand, telling the story of the products, I think that will, continue to resonate, especially if there's a swing, kind of an anti-AI swing, right? Or do you want more of that human aspect to it? Telling the stories behind your brand, I think will really resonate.
And also, if I'm pulling together some of content you were sharing earlier is a big piece of this is also hitting me up across multiple channels, right? And figuring out like, how do you tell that the right story through notifications, through text, through email, maybe through direct mail, maybe through loyalty platforms, like wherever you have that customer, which kind of goes back to the data side of things at the end of the day as well. Is that
Yeah.
like a fair, not trying to summarize everything into a sentence, but is
Yeah.
that
I
kind of
mean,
how
I
you
think
see things?
that's essentially table stakes now, right? Of having that level of personalization of sending somebody the right message in the right channel
Yeah.
at the right time. And so, yeah, that's all related. And I'm guessing people will be more likely to tune out your brand if you're not really operating in that
Mhm.
way. It's just going to become more and more obvious.
Maybe one more question. Sorry. I'll keep saying one more. You just mentioned personalization. Where does personalization work and where does it fall flat? Right. Like, and I won't ramble. I'm curious for your take on it.
You should ramble after this for sure. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely over engineering that can happen when it comes to
Oh,
personalization. We try to tread that line to, not go too wild with it. An email is still an unpersonalized email is still better than no email. You also need to mix it up a little bit. You need to surprise people. And so I think this is kind of an old story. I don't know how relevant it is still, but I think LinkedIn back in the day, they had some sort of formula where every 10th email you got was not personalized. Yeah, there was like and that was one of the better performing emails. And, I have countless stories around that of the oops emails and things like that that do great. So I kind of urge people to keep that in mind. Like, have your system built so the automations are really personalized and trigger based, and you know exactly what's going on, but leave room for some weird and some creative and stuff that's going to surprise people, because that's definitely going to break through, especially if every email is perfectly optimized and personalized, then it's actually the ones that aren't optimized and personalized that might make an impact.
you actually want to shock the system sometimes and just
Mhm.
go explore. I think this is the I'm so sorry we made the mistake or whatever trend from last year. So I can't wait to see what the next
Yeah.
not personalized thing
Yeah, that's
is.
right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. There's a way to take an interesting concept and then just like knock it down until it's not effective anymore,
Yeah,
which,
you're going to be my testing audience of one. I'm going to start sending you just random stuff all the time. Be like, what broke through in our conversations?
yeah,
This will be
let's do
great.
it.
Well, thank you. This was really fun. I appreciate you taking the time. Appreciate you sharing so much advice. Just to wrap, if there's anything else you wanted to share that you didn't get to share, like any takeaways, thoughts, whatever, here's some space for it. And if not, just where can folks find you, Scalero, who should be reaching out as well.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to be here. I think I've shared enough takes for the day.
Got enough notes.
People are ready to move on to the next thing on their queue. So yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I don't post a lot. Everyone tells me to post more, but here we are. But yeah, message me there. Fill out a form on Scalero's website. I'll see that right away. It's the first Slack channel I'll check. So would love to have these conversations and share what we're seeing and what others are saying as this space evolves quickly.
Thanks, man. Well, I really appreciate this. I genuinely took over a page worth of notes. I learned something every time we chat and very grateful that you took the time to share with the audience.
Yeah, likewise, Aaron. Great to connect with you again, and always great chatting with you.
Yeah. Talk soon.
All right, bye.
I'm Aaron Schwartz, co-founder of Orita.ai, where we help hundreds of brands like Spanx, Faraday, and Salt and Stone get the absolute most out of their customer lists. Learn more at Orita.ai or check out my interviews with the founders of Klaviyo, Birdies, Caraway, and plenty more wherever you get your podcasts.